Numi ketan dati, numi nim. Abba halach la'avoda, halach abba, yashuv im tzit halevana, yavi lach matana. My name is Ruth Cohen, née Friedman. I was born in Mukachevo, which was then Czechoslovakia. My father's business was manufacturing wine, liquor, and bottling beer. The household was very orthodox. We observed everything very strictly. My early childhood was very good. I was happy until I was 8 years old, and then it changed. The relationship between our neighbors, who are mostly Czech, was very good. There was absolutely no animosity that I ever encountered. I played soccer with my friends. My family was fine, good, really happy. When Czechoslovakia was annexed to Hungary, we heard the news on the radio. The next morning, when we got up to go to school, my mother was terribly upset because she was worried about our future. She was sort of having a premonition that things were not going to be very good. Many of the rules changed. My father's business was taken away from him. We were not allowed to go to the movies. We were not allowed to go to theater as we did before. And that's when life really changed. We got news that my aunt and some cousins were deported from Slovakia to Majdanek. Somehow my family found out that they were killed immediately. We all went into mournings. Or so. Some young girls came to our house from Poland and were telling us stories about what was going on in Poland, which we absolutely had no knowledge of. And that was pretty awful. That were the stories where people were lined up there to dig graves, and they were lined up and shot. My family did want to immigrate, but somehow at one point my father decided that he cannot leave his mother. We had to leave our home when we went to the ghetto, which was in 1944, which was about 6 weeks before we went to Auschwitz. I remember my mother saying that we have to take our best clothing with us, which happened to have been new clothing because we always got new clothing for Passover. And this was just before Passover. Our ghetto was just about 4 or 5 streets away from our house, where the one area, one very long street was cordoned off, and people had to squeeze themselves into other people's homes. We had to stay there until the end of May. I think it was the last week of May, and then were transported to Auschwitz. We had to walk from the ghetto to a brick factory, which was the gathering point. The town had about 10,000 Jews, and the neighboring areas had another 10,000 Jews. And this one brick factory was a gathering point for deportation, if we can call it that. The trains came in, and really that's when I have a few memories of one of my very, very favorite teachers not wanting to go up on the train, so she sat down, boycotting the orders, and she was shot, which was quite awful to witness. When we got on the train, I do remember whether my mother or father saying, "We don't know where we're going, but we were told that we're going to be working in some fields someplace." We were crowded in. This one wagon was predominantly my family. And of course we had no food. I don't know how long it took, probably 4 days to get to Auschwitz. We had absolutely no knowledge or understanding or even a hint of what is going to happen to us. All we saw was the sign Arbeit macht frei. Meant nothing to us other than understood what it meant, but other than that we had no understanding, knowledge, or report about what's going on. I do remember gathering, and I do remember being selected to go with my sister to the right, I think. My father went to the right also, a little further away. My mother, Bertha, my little brother, Arnold, and my two little sister and brother also went to the left, which we didn't know at the time, but found out pretty soon that they were going to the gas chambers. My next memory is of going into a barracks with my sister, with many people. And all of a sudden, somebody came to, ran to my sister, hugged her, and they both cried. They knew each other. This young woman was a blokkertiste. Right after she met us, she gave us a cube of sugar, which I ate, and I literally, when I think about it, and I don't too often, but when I do, I feel the sugar going through my veins because I haven't eaten at that point for, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 days, whatever it was. That's my memory of that. And she told us that my mother and brother and my other little brother and sister are no longer alive because they have been killed in the gas chambers. I remember not believing it. I remember not understanding what she was talking about, of course, but that is probably the most strongest happening in Auschwitz to me. So when she saw my sister, she treated her specially. She treated me specially. She made my sister her personal assistant, and she got me a job because I was a young child. She got me a job as a librarian, and our job was from morning to night. In the early morning, we got up very early. We had a Zähler, standing outside, cold, rain, freezing, hot, whatever. And then I think that we got some coffee, but I am not even sure about that. And then all day long, except as I said, the few people who were working were busy. Everyone else, I don't know where they were. I have no idea until sometime in the evening when we had our dinner, which we had to line up for, which was nothing but a bowl of soup. And we had to go back in the barracks and go to sleep. We were 12 people on each layer of bed, and there were 3 layers. Luckily, I was on the bottom. I didn't have to climb up. We had 1 blanket for all of us. I do remember that one thing. Then as one person moved, everybody had to move, so it was a little rough. The food in Auschwitz was pretty scarce and pretty awful. I was sick at one point, and I went to the infirmary, and the nurses there hid me when the German officers came to do their selection. So had they not hidden me, I would have probably been taken. I'm sure that that helped me survive. I remember in Auschwitz when we were young kids were standing by the gate, and there were 3 or 4 SS in the booth speaking rather loud, so they had to make sure that we were hearing it, talking about the Jews and how nice it is that they're getting killed and how nice it is that they're not going to be around, etc., etc. And it was like a joke to them. My sister stayed with me throughout the year that we were prisoners. Sometime in July, we got a message from my father that he's in Auschwitz, and we were in Birkenau, I think, and he was in Auschwitz, or the other way, I never remember. He was going to be passing by where we are, and if we could come to this road, maybe we can see each other. I don't know how we managed to go see my father, whether we had to ask permission, either from the broadcast or someone. I don't remember doing that. So I did meet him one time, and I remember feeling and discussing with my sister, at least he is alive. Sometime we got a message from another uncle. This was my mother's youngest brother from the lager next to us. We were just separated by a fence. That we should come to the fence at 4 o'clock. So we did. So he said, come to see me every day, and on a day when I'm not here, you will know that I no longer am. So, and then one day somebody showed up, a woman, and he had sent the message, saying that he was taken. His name was Elish. I don't ever speak about these things. Life in the Lager was, from what I remember, I was working. My sister must have been working all day. I think she had to clean the block. Nobody was working other than these few people, because this one lager was strictly a Vernichtungslager. We didn't get tattooed because the aim of this particular lager was not to survive. During Zelappel, Mengele was around with his entourage and selected people. And I witnessed one of my aunts being selected and being very upset about it. Very, very, very upset about it. End of September, the beginning of October, the crematoria were stopped because there was some form of revolution, and one of them was almost blown up, and then they closed all of them. So there was no more selection, no more killing people in Auschwitz after that. That's how we survived. And they had to transport people out of there. I left Auschwitz at the end of November, and were taken to Nuremberg again in cattle cars. The same routine. I don't know how long it took. In Nuremberg, we worked for Siemens, but then Nuremberg was being constantly bombed. So they had to transport us out of there to Holešov, near Pilsen. And again, we worked for Siemens. After about a week, I was in terrible pain. This pain actually started in Nuremberg. But as soon as we got to Holešov, and I worked for 1 week, my back started to hurt again, and it never stopped. We stayed there, and one day, it was 2 days before the end of the war. We were in our barracks, in our room actually. The window we had was up near the ceiling. Somebody stood up on the bed. Somehow they saw civilian people running with machine guns towards the barracks. We still didn't know what was going on, but found out pretty soon that these were white Russian partisans who came down, opened the gates. There were no German officers around. They opened the gates and told us that we are free. I don't know whether the Germans or the civilians would be coming in and disturb us. They locked the gate and told us not to go out and nobody will come in. However, they said whoever wants to go with them can. So 120 people went with them, and about 2-3 hours later, many of them came back. They were told by these Russian partisans that they don't want the Jews around. The Jews should go back. Only the others can stay with them. So they came back and stayed. In 2 days, the war was over, and the Americans did manage to get to us. The Americans fed us. Fortunately, not too much. I guess by then they had the experience of other camps where they gave people a lot of food and people died. They were very careful, and they told us to be careful. And my sister and I only stayed there for a month, and then we somehow got on a train and went back to Mukachevo. Somewhere on the train we were told that my father is alive and he is waiting for us at home. We went home and we met him, and he was waiting. He was in Buchenwald, and he was liberated in April. Nobody else survived, as a matter of fact, except for my father and my sister and myself. But we going to our house, knocking on the door, nobody even answered the door. They, I think, were afraid that we're going to demand our house back. And I remember that I went by myself to Budapest, where I was in the children's hospital for a month, and they found nothing wrong with me. But the pain persisted, of course. And ultimately, it was discovered that I had tuberculosis on the spine, and was treated. I didn't really have much contact with the outside world. I stayed in bed for 6 months. I was in a cast in bed. The Russians had liberated Mukachevo. So when we came back in 1945, they were still the rulers. In December, they closed the borders. So my father and sister moved, as did many other people, to Žatec, which is near Prague. After I was finished with in the Tatars, I went back to Žatec, but it was for a short time, because shortly after that we came to the United States. The experience on the ship was wonderful. Almost the whole ship of about 700 people were survivors, and some of them from my hometown. So it was probably, because of that, a very good trip. Everybody was seasick but I. So that was good. I can't pinpoint when I felt completely free, actually, but I dare say that it wasn't until I was in the United States. My dreams were just for a better life. These things happened. Certainly miss my mother and my family of 59 people, and I knew most of them, all of them. But I don't really talk about my experiences. I know they were bad, but I think on the whole they were better than many others, many other people's. So I don't think that I'm living my experiences. I don't think I ever did. Never discussed it with my dad. He never talked about it. I don't know how he survived. I don't know what happened at his survival. Never really talked about it with my sister until recently, just before she died. I think that in Auschwitz particularly, and some people even in Nuremberg, and many less people in Holešov were guilty because they wanted to be there. They were doing everything, and unfortunately, too many of them did it with glee, joy. I have 3 children. I have 8 grandchildren. They give us lots of pleasure. And life goes on. I would like the world to be a good one. Really, that is my most strongest wish there is. I want that. Numi numi katantati, numi numi nem.
Did your mother used to sing that?
Yes. I sing it to my grandchildren. My daughter sings it to her children. And maybe they will sing it to their children. And that's it.